When you put a bunch of teens and preteens in a building together, don't feed them enough, and then work them for 40 hours a week like dogs, no shit, someone's gonna snap. If I don't quit, I'm not making it out of this alive. We'll start at the beginning. I started dancing when I was 5 years old. My mom worked at just a local dance studio in the town I grew up in, currently live in. And I would go after school. My mom would pick me up and just take me back to the dance studio, and I would just have to sit around for the rest of the day until she was done. And one day I turned to her and I was like, "Hey, mom, why don't I just take class if I'm here?" And little did I know that would start me down a path of 16 years of a lot of things. 16 years of struggle. The early years were pretty simple. I mean, when you're that young, you're just kind of taking very basic classes. But as I got older, I started taking it more seriously. And by 10, 11 years old was when I decided, yeah, I want to pursue this professionally. I want to make this a career, which is really early to decide what you want your career for the rest of your life to be. Fuck it, we ball.
Real.
And so we started looking into programs outside of my hometown because there's a surprising amount of dance studios here in town. And I was taking classes from all of them pretty much, even though there's so much politics involved in dance. None of them liked the fact that I took classes anywhere else, especially because, and I'm going to be very open about this, I am trans, but at that time I was very much not. And male ballet dancers, as I will refer to myself in the past tense, are a hot commodity. They're very rare. So everyone kind of wants you, and I'll get more into that, how that plays into a lot of the toxic dynamics of the ballet world a bit later on. But they all just put up with me because I had a penis. I kind of just got away with going and taking classes anywhere where anyone else would get berated by a teacher for going to another studio. It's weird as shit. Super political, even at that young of an age. We're still in like between 10 and 12 years old. Now, around, I think it was between 13 and 15, I started looking into these programs that are called summer intensives, which is essentially a 2 to 8 week summer camp where you go and you dance for 40 hours a week, usually 6 to 7 days a week for the entire time that you're there. And they are exhausting. There's a reason they call intensives. And the first one I went to was a place in Connecticut. I am going to try and refrain from mentioning any specific places, by the way. If I do slip up, I would prefer that not make it into the video because I don't want. These are not a lot of nice people.
Nothing goes on the internet you haven't seen.
Yeah. Anyways, so I started at this place in Connecticut, and it was brutal for like 15-year-old me to be doing that every day. And the problems and the toxicity and the flaws in the ballet world really started to show themselves to me during this time. And the biggest one is the food and nutrition in general. It is not handled healthily. So, for a bit of background, ballet dancers are universally pretty skinny, and that is an entire part of the aesthetic of the industry is slim, muscular men and bone-thin women. And even at this children's summer camp, it was blatant to see that they were not providing for our nutritional needs like they should have, leading to cases of malnutrition. During one summer intensive, I watched as a friend of mine began screaming and crying in my dorm room because he couldn't feel his legs anymore. We had to call 911. I showed the EMTs where he was because he couldn't move, and they put him in the stretcher, took him out, and he came back the next day in a wheelchair. And it turns out that he was severely malnourished and had vitamin deficiencies to the point where his muscles refused to work anymore. And he was in that wheelchair for 3 days. Then he was walking around for a few more days, but still not dancing. But about a week and a half later, he was back in at the pressure of the teachers when, in my humble opinion, he should have gone home.
I can't imagine any reasonable system that would do anything other than send that child home.
That's because the system isn't reasonable. Ballet companies and these schools primarily make their money off of donors. They're all nonprofit organizations. However, the donors want is shows. They want performances. They want, showcases. So the dancers are treated as assets in order to facilitate the creation of these shows that then make the company, conservatory, whatever title they go by, the money they need to keep running. And this treating people like assets thing is very prevalent, especially when they control all of the food you're provided. You seek out other food, you may get publicly ridiculed for it. My closest friend, who I still am friends with to this day, we've known each other for 8 years. We met at that first summer intensive. We would stay up some nights and we would order Domino's pretty regularly because we weren't getting enough food and we were both growing young adults and we needed it. And the director of the academy walked into the room with us, chilling, playing Super Smash Bros. In one of the dorm lounges and eating pizza together. And she started, sorry, I don't know the right word, lecturing us, I guess. A little bit more intense than that, but I think lecturing is the closest word I can provide about how eating this pizza, it's bad for us, it's gonna make us fat, and just all of this kind of nasty shit. And then the next day we go to class and she starts picking on my friend in front of everyone for ordering Domino's the night before.
Yes, public shaming, the most effective way to help a child grow healthily.
Yeah, next story is not something that directly happened to me, but it's something that has happened in multiple places to people I know and is something I have witnessed the after effects of. At these camps, especially summer intensives, and I'll get more into year-round programs here in a bit, they hire nutritional specialists to come in and speak. These are usually nutritional specialists that are handpicked to say exactly what they want to hear. It's usually messages of eating leaner food, structuring diets around maintaining low weight. There's always some good nutritional health advice sprinkled in. Make sure you're getting your vitamins, your minerals. These are the foods you really want to look for. But I've seen people take these things to heart and become anorexic because of them.
So it's good advice if you're trying to be their best possible candidate, but nothing else.
Exactly.
It occurs to me that when a dancer is an asset, a child is an investment, not a person.
You get it. To bounce off of that idea of a child being an investment, scholarships. Merit-based scholarships are handed out pretty frequently, but the one thing to note is that male ballet dancers at a lot of schools around the country get a flat 30% scholarship. If you are a penis haver who is willing to come to this program, you are usually guaranteed 30% off of your tuition. And these tuitions are college level tuitions. And that builds resentment between genders when female merit-based scholarships are usually incredibly stingy. They're very stingy with them and don't hand them out very often. And it's all serves to perpetuate this competitive, just everyone's at each other's throats attitude because I have to show that I'm the best so that I get the money I need to do this. And it gets toxic. It gets toxic really fast.
Dude, that sounds like a game show.
I was thinking too, this is kind of rating like dance moms in a way where like your child is not only an investment for certain things, but like I
Dance
feel like
moms,
TV
crazy.
media is also, yeah, huge what makes people do things, inspiration, I don't know, whatever the word is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like you're living in a reality show.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
kind of is. That's because Dance Moms isn't really played up at all. I'm going to be honest with you. I saw that shit happen on a day-to-day basis with no cameras when I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah, people actually behave like that on a regular basis. And the parents at the younger level get so bad. They buy into the narrative a lot of the times of you need to keep your child skinny for them to be successful in this. So now you have the parents in on the malnutrition. Anorexia is ballet's worst kept secret.
If you have the parent and the instructor both telling you to eat in a way that's unhealthy, that's every trusted adult in your life now informing you of things that are blatantly dangerous to your long-term development, along with your short-term happiness.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
reminding me of that book by, what's her name? From iCarly.
Jeanette
Oh,
McCurdy.
Jeanette McCurdy. The book is I'm Glad My Mom Died. I think
Yeah.
is the name of the title. Yeah, for reference, my parents were not a part of this group of parents who really engaged in these pretty foul behaviors. My mom was always worried about me. Now, before I move on to year-round programs and get closer to my time as an actual pre-professional ballet dancer, I want to touch on my own mental health history because it's very deeply intertwined with my time in ballet. So I'm going to offer a mild trigger warning on the subjects of depression, suicidal attempts, these sorts of things, because I went through some pretty rough shit at the time.
There will be a timestamp up there that tells you when to skip to so that you can skip that if that is not a part of the story that you are ready for. Please continue.
Absolutely. So, during my first year round program at any of these academies, I was living in a dormitory. And the first part is that my room did not have a window. The room I slept in, the room I lived in, did not have access to direct sunlight.
Dude, that's step one. Oh.
In fact, it was even worse. The window I had in my room had no curtains on it and just faced a brick wall. Glass brick wall.
Mental health destruction speed run. Holy shit.
My only real social space that I would spend time in that wasn't a dance studio was this lounge that was across the hall from my room and was nested further in the building and just had these fluorescent lights that were just awful. And during this time, I made some friends. Young love, when you're in ostensibly late middle school, early high school, you have these relationships. And when you're living with all of these people, it gets bad kind of quick.
Plus trauma bonding.
Plus, yep, exactly. So this story is more personal and less about the industry itself, but I do want to tell the whole story of my experiences during this time. I made a friend during the summer intensive who did not get into the academy, wasn't accepted, but we kept in contact afterwards. Now, this person started dating a girl who did get into the academy during the summer intensive. So they had to go their separate ways. And I don't know the details of that relationship. I know it fell apart. I kept in contact with this friend and he began to spiral. He then one night told me, hey, if you don't hear from me tomorrow, you know what happened. After telling me he had a rope and a bottle of Jack Daniels. Needless to say, I freaked out. I was 16 and this guy lived across the country. I don't know what to do. With the help of my parents and the dorm mother, we managed to get in contact with the authorities of his local town, and they performed a wellness check, which he later credited to snapping him out of the state he was in and allowing him to move forward and get help.
Hell yeah.
Now, unfortunately, in order to get the information of where he lives, I had to talk to his ex, who was living in the dorms. She was the only person I knew who knew where he lived. She was an unfortunately unstable individual who was struggling with her own problems in life, as well as being in the same traumatizing, stressful situation that I was. And it turns out she had been stashing pills. And when she figured out what was going on, that he was likely going to attempt, she attempted to swallow every pill. Luckily, her roommate was there and had to dig them out of her mouth. But this whole situation culminated in a few new rules for the academy regarding how medication is handled and a whole lot of trauma for me. I went to therapy for PTSD for, I believe, 3 years before I was able to get the symptoms under control. And what I want to highlight is that these spaces in the ballet world do nothing but aggravate these sorts of issues. When you put a bunch of teens and preteens in a building together, don't feed them enough, and then work them for 40 hours a week like dogs, no shit, someone's gonna snap. Happens all the time in the ballet world. People just can't handle it anymore. But anyways, that's that whole story. I literally at the end of that night ended up in the shower and sat on the floor and cried for like 3 hours. And I couldn't sit in the shower for 4 years after that because it would instantly trigger a flashback.
Avoidant behavior. That is very familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I moved on. Some other things happened. Some interpersonal drama happened between the same cast of people that I just laid out for you, but I don't think much of it's pertinent. And so we move on. The next year, I was at a different school in a different state, up and moved everything, roomed with a fellow dancer who, she was wonderful, she was kind, she was nice, she treated me great. We never had any issues. The location I was living in was a rough part of town. It's a residential area outside of the main city, and it's very well known for not being a great place. The kind of place where you wake up to gunshots pretty regularly throughout your week. I started my time there by taking public transport most
Ooh.
days.
At what age were you in this time?
16, 17.
You mentioned you were rooming. Was this a school supported situation, or were you just
No.
roommates with another person your age?
I was simply roommates with another person my age. We independently met. This academy did not have any attached housing situation, so it's up to the students to figure out their own thing, and a lot of them room together, which is the solution I ended up going with. Anyways, I would continue. Public transport sucked. I mean, if you've ever taken American public transport for more than just a hop, skip, and a jump, it's kind of ass. I would take the light rail into the city. Okay, I would have to take a bus from my apartment to the light rail station, and then I would have to take the light rail 45 minutes into the city, and I would walk another 15 minutes from the light rail station to the academy slash company building because they share a building. And during this time, I was still dancing 40 hours a week. Now, on top of that, I was also in school. I was trying to finish high school, and I did finish high school. I finished just 6 months ahead of time in January of, I don't know if it was exactly 6 months, but about half a school year ahead of time in January of that year. But this was also the year the big old COVID-19 happened, which we'll get to that because that threw a wrench in the works. So at this academy, I would usually come in at about 9 o'clock in the morning. We would have class all day, and these classes range from technique classes to contemporary ballet and modern to do more than just classical, some character dancing, a lot of Pilates. I don't enjoy Pilates. Fucking mat Pilates sucks. It hurts. If you try and voice like, hey, what we're doing is actively hurting me and I'm feeling repercussions of this in my day-to-day life, they'll just say, well, everyone else has to do it and it's good for you, so do it.
Cool.
No such thing as accommodation. Literally not a single thing. It's, you want accommodations? Leave.
How frequent are lawsuits for the ADA and child safety?
Pretty rare, actually, because the ballet industry is a predominantly white occupied space, and it is usually occupied by affluent white families. I dated a wonderful girl, she's amazing, who at one point told me that due to her parents' mistreatment of her, a friend had called CPS, or called the authorities to attempt to get Child Protective Services involved. Nothing ever came of it. Because in these affluent white neighborhoods, a lot of the time, these sorts of behaviors aren't actually addressed in any meaningful way because the authorities say, well, they're fed well, they're given shelter, their parents have money, we're not going to do anything. So the abuse and mistreatment that you undergo as a ballet dancer is very much connected to that because as a kid, everything you're doing is under parental permission. Your parents are driving you to this, it's all of these sorts of things. So if the parents say, no, it's fine, the police aren't likely to do anything, which is a really unfortunate truth.
I'm guessing they wouldn't ask you.
No, the police don't ask questions to kids. They don't trust kids to know what's right for them, which is stupid, by the way. If a child feels that something is being done wrong to them, you should listen to them. But anyways, so uncommon. To answer your question, quite uncommon. And if they do happen, they get swept under the rug very quickly. So, start at 9 a.m. usually, and the normal schedule would go to about 2 to 4 p.m. However, because at the time I was a male ballet dancer, I was expected to participate in extra partnering classes because they don't have a lot of male ballet dancers in the program. So for the younger kids who take classes later at night after school is over, I am asked to come in and take a 2-hour class from 8 to 10. It's a 45-minute ride back home. I'm not going home. So I would get there at 9 a.m., leave at 10 p.m. after 6 to 10 hours of physical activity, walk to the light rail station in the middle of the night, take that light rail all the way back to the part of town, hop on a bus as a 17-year-old twink, and hope nothing bad happened on my way home. Thankfully, I was about halfway through the year able to get a hand on a car because I had my driver's license. I just didn't have a car. It was actually my sister's. My sister sold her car to me when she got an upgrade. My beloved little 2004 Subaru Forester. Quick, lighthearted tangent about that car. It had all of the letters of Subaru spelled out on the back and they were individual pieces. And over time, the pieces would fall off. So it started as Subaru, and then it became Ubaru because the S fell off, and then it became the Ubau because the R fell off, and then eventually it was just the Ubu.
Ubu notices your car.
Yeah. That car is actually still, you can see it on Google Maps at one of the places I lived later. Not the year after this, but the year after that. The place I lived, my car is still out front. So I don't have that car anymore, but it lives on. And that solved a lot of issues, but I got into a car accident in that neighborhood that I was living in during that time, about halfway through the year. I'd say probably in December. And so I get into this car accident. It's extremely traumatizing. All legal proceedings are done in regards to this accident, so I can speak freely. I struck a pedestrian. I was coming around a blind corner, and they were in the middle of the road on their phone.
Ooh.
No stop signs, no crosswalks, just a bus stop on the other side of the street. And that threw a wrench in things. I ended up moving out of that apartment because of this accident, and I got a place downtown in the city that was a set of student lofts. And we came to an agreement with the people who run the place that my dance education that I was partaking in counted for me to qualify as a student to live in student housing. And that place was nice. I met some interesting characters when I was living there because it's like 4 people to an apartment. I met a mid-30s ex-con who was going back to school after getting out of jail and was going in for computer science. We had a lot of really interesting philosophical discussions late at night sometimes. Really cool guy. Another computer science major who, the big thing I remember about him, he uses Linux, and he would change his operating system as soon as he had gotten the hang of the one he was using. So every time he got comfortable with an operating system, he'd be like, all right, time to change it. And then there was this other guy who was this phenomenal artist, usually ink on paper. Phenomenal artist, drew some of the trippiest, kind of scary shit I've ever seen. But I saw him once a week when he came out to make a double batch of ramen, in the middle of the night, and it would say 3 words and then go back in. Whenever I talked to him, super nice guy. So I'm here. I'm 17 in an apartment full of college students.
Can I just say, I love the when the full moon strikes kind of roomy. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's so great. There's always super chill. Now, a couple months pass since I moved into this place, and then the big old C-19 hits. And things start shutting down. We initially try to just do, masks and all these sorts of things. And I, looking back on it, don't think the Academy did enough. Once again, I'm always in the camp of just send everyone home with these sorts of things. You don't want to endanger people when we don't really know what's going on. Because it was very early during the pandemic, and we really didn't have a lot of knowledge as to what was going on yet. During this time, we were actually doing a student choreography module, essentially. And I was choreographing a piece. I was going to have my first choreographed work on stage, hopefully. It never came to be. COVID-19 shut everything down. I went back to my hometown for the last couple months, and we did classes online. And that summer, I also did an entire summer intensive online. We built a dance floor for me. So the floors of ballet studios are sprung. It's usually just a half-inch, quarter-inch thick piece of wood on top of foam blocks to provide a little bit of suspension and take a lot of the impact off of your joints. And we built a version of that where we had the same kind of wood material, and then I took pool noodles and cut them and then hot glued them to the bottom of the wood and used that as my dance floor. So summer intensive this time is pretty unremarkable because I was just at home. It was probably the most healthy of a relationship I've had with ballet because I was just at home.
How was the education itself remote as a ballet dancer?
Zoom.
What was the effectiveness of your teachings?
The remote teaching specifically, less effective than in person. But that's because a lot of ballet teachers, I feel like, we're all kinesthetic learners. We all learn through physical movement. It's a very common trait in ballet dancers and just dancers in general is repeating similar motions in order to put them to memory. And a lot of that comes with these teachers who will come up and will poke, prod, grab, and move you in order to put you where they want you. So I have had teachers come up behind me, completely unprompted. I didn't know they were there, grab my hips and literally tilt my hips. So I tilt my pelvis forward, and I was just like, whoa.
That doesn't feel like a healthy relationship with authority and bodily autonomy to me.
Bodily autonomy? You're funny.
What was your relationship to like your gender in this time, being the one male dancer that a lot was expected of you?
I didn't have much of a relationship with my gender at the time other than I am a male ballet dancer. That was my entire identity. My entire identity as a person was tied up in the fact that I was a male ballet dancer. Not a ballet dancer, but a male ballet dancer specifically.
Ooh, that's a big old brick wall on that gender exploration, ain't
Yes,
it?
it is. You can't
Yeah.
explore your gender in ballet. In the classical ballet world, you can't do it. I knew a trans femme who was so passionate about ballet and wanted to do it so bad that they registered under their dead name and as a male for a summer intensive and went and spent that entire time and opened up to a few people about it. And I learned just through looking at their social media. But nowadays, I look at that and it just breaks my heart. I've heard so many stories of both trans femme and trans masc individuals struggling to even try and explore their gender because ballet is such a gendered environment. Are either a male ballet dancer, you do these exercises, you work out in these specific ways to build these muscle groups in order to do these things and to look a very specific way. Broad shoulders, toned but still present upper body, very idyllic male figure. Whereas the women are completely on the other side of the spectrum. It's all lean muscle and just don't eat and be skinny.
It's as far away from gender exploratory as I can imagine any environment being.
Yeah, it's basically impossible. And most people just say if they do realize that they're having like gender shit going on in their head, they say, I'll deal with it when I'm not in dance.
Well, that begs the question, if you didn't leave dance, would you have figured it out, you think?
I think it would have happened. I don't know if it would have happened at the same time or on the same time scale. And I think my own sense of identity would be a bit different than it is these days. But I think it was inevitable because this is who I am and I just had to figure it out. But it was definitely a big brick wall, and it's why it took me until I was like 21, 22 to realize that I was trans femme. During the time I was an openly bisexual male and was exploring my sexuality, and there's no shortage of pretty boys to explore your sexuality with in ballet. I
Real.
can guarantee you that. Not a
Twinks
damn
abound.
shortage. Twinks abound. There is a stereotype that men in ballet are queer for a reason because it's true.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. So the trans angle is like a no-go because it's binary rigid. But how's the queer angle in those communities?
Very open. The trans issues aren't really talked about at all, but you're very safe to be openly gay, bisexual, lesbian, pan, whatever. It's a very safe space in that regard, especially for AMAB individuals to express those sorts of things. It's already an effeminate art form, and you're already getting called slurs doing it as a kid. Yeah, I mean, I went and wore tights for 4 hours. Tights and a thong. It's called a dance
As you
belt.
do. A dance belt. A dance belt, okay.
You know what a tucking gaff is?
I do not.
So it's an undergarment that is meant to essentially flatten out the appearance of that pelvic region with padding and pressure. And a dance belt is just a very optimized version of that type of underwear because when you're in tights, you don't want to be able to see someone's junk.
It is absolutely fascinating to me how unique of a situation ballet is for gender repression because it's not sin. It's not discrimination in the way that we think of transphobia usually. It is the inconvenience of transness that suppresses it.
Correct. It is a system built upon a binary gender dynamic set in the Romantic era of storytelling and the Renaissance. This was the time that we developed this art form, and we haven't changed the structure since. The French kind of built it, the Russians stole it, and we went from there. And I say the Russians stole it, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's genuinely, ballet is just a very important piece of culture in Russia specifically, and just historically in general. I had a teacher, and I'm actually going to drop a name on this one because you should look her up. Her name is Elena Chernachova. She was the principal ballet mistress of American Ballet Theater in New York City
That sounds important.
and was also a ex dancer for the USSR who fled the country in order to come to America and continue dancing. This was a very common story during the time.
Isn't this the plot of Black Widow?
Probably. I mean, Black Widow's entire story is built upon like a dramatization of ballet culture,
Wait, you're
almost.
talking about Black Swan?
Black Widow
The
from
superhero movie.
the Marvel character. Her whole
Oh.
thing is being raised in an assassin ballet school, basically.
Oh.
Yeah, it's surprisingly accurate, except for the assassin part, as far as I know.
Hey, maybe you didn't get to the cool part. Maybe if you just kept trying, you know?
Maybe I didn't. Maybe if
could
I
be a
just stayed in the
fucking
closet
badass
a couple
superhero, but-
more years,
Yeah.
you know?
A couple more years, it'll be fine.
Yeah, a couple more years. It'll be fine. Anyways, I had a lot of Russian teachers. I met a lot of people from Eastern Europe while I was a dancer. They're all very cool people and very scary. Every single one of them I met, I'm like, I am intimidated by you. Oh yeah, Elena Chernysheva. She danced for the National Ballet in Russia during the siege of Leningrad in World War II.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah. During a time when they had no food, the ballet was a piece of culture that they could cling to help keep morale up. And so the ballet dancers just kept doing it. It's a crazy story. I'm pretty sure there is a biography that was written about her.
That's so cool that you got to work with her directly.
I got to work with her son very directly. She had passed by the time I learned about her, but her son was doing his best to pass on her teachings and pass on her story. There's a laundry list of ex-Russian dancers who fled to the US. Rudolf Nureyev, Mikhail Baryshnikov are two big ones. Anna Pavlova, I believe. I'm rusty on my names. It has been a while. But if you're interested, ballet has a very interesting history, especially in Eastern Europe, as a tool for the state. But anyways, back to talking about bullshit I went through. So I had the year that I spent remote, and then I moved back to Connecticut, to the same place I was at before. This time, however, I was an RA. Same function and role as like a college RA. You're in charge of the kids, you make sure they get from point A to point B, and you just have a few extra responsibilities to help out around the facility. It was usually just like front desk duty in the mornings, helping transport food to and from the food provider, and just a couple other miscellaneous things. Now, during this time, I became very dissatisfied with ballet culture, and especially the culture around food. And I noticed an extremely concerning pattern. We would receive food from the food providers, and it would be meals that no one liked. And that information would then be passed to the director of the academy, whose job it was to say to the food providers, hey, maybe make more of this meal and less of this meal. Unfortunately, the opposite happened. The feedback was heard, and seemingly, we got more of the food we didn't like. So people just ate less. And part of my job as an RA was to clean up the dining area after meals and stuff. And I was realizing how much food I was throwing out. And I was like, these kids aren't eating. My kids that I'm in charge of aren't eating. And I was extremely frustrated. So one of the days that followed, I went around and I talked to a bunch of the students and was like, hey, what are some of the meals that you've had that you like? And what are some of them you don't like? I just talked to the kids. I got a couple signatures from them just on a piece of paper. I wrote a list out of the food that they liked. And I also asked for suggestions of like, if you could ask the food providers for any kind of meal, what would it be? And I wrote those down as well. And during one of the trips to go pick up food from them, I went up to the head chef and was like, hey, I've realized the kids aren't eating a lot of the food that's being sent over, especially during the lunchtime, which means they're missing a whole meal. And a lot of these kids don't eat breakfast, so they're waking up, dancing 8 hours, and waiting to get to dinner to eat. And I made them aware of this. I gave them a list and said, hey, this is the food that they're interested in. I'll let you do with it as you will. And the food situation became better. We got more of what we would eat. Kids started eating more. Morale improved. And I went completely behind the back of the director on this.
Phenomenal child advocacy, by the way. That is
Hell
like
yeah,
textbook.
activism.
I was tired of it. I was so fucking tired of it. And obviously during this time, the pandemic is still happening. And I watch as corners get cut. Risks are taken that put the health of these kids at risk and puts them at possible risk of exposure to COVID during the most volatile time of the pandemic. And I just got so frustrated with it. After being there, and we get to Nutcracker season. Now, Nutcracker season, I think it's a good time to break down why it is hell on earth. Nutcracker season consists of two phases. There's the rehearsal phase, which is add about 4 hours to every day because of special Nutcracker rehearsals.
Ooh.
Or more if I'd consider it unlucky, others would consider it lucky. If you get selected for specific roles, you get a lot of extra rehearsals. And there was this one girl who I knew during the dress rehearsal phase was at the theater from 8 a.m. in the morning to midnight for days in a row.
Jeez.
I wasn't subjected to that. I thought it was ridiculous because I saw her come back from those rehearsals just dead. Now, it was during that time that I sustained a lot of my repetitive stress injuries that have led to a lot of the chronic pain I deal with nowadays, which is primarily centered around my shoulders. As a male ballet dancer, I have to lift people a lot, in fact. And my muscles hadn't really fully developed yet. Because during this time, I'm like 18, 19. My muscles didn't really develop until I was in my 20s. So I am lifting these people and forcing my body to do things it really shouldn't. And I developed tendonitis in both rotator cuffs in my shoulders. Yeah, this was 5 years ago that I developed this, and it will be with me for the rest of my life.
Wow.
I've had 3 separate medical professionals tell me you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of the life. Physical therapy can make it better, but it's never going to go away. And I also just injure myself repeatedly. I've pulled muscles. I've pulled both quadriceps multiple times. I've had ankle impingements, which is essentially where the bones in your ankle pinch the tendons and muscles that cause flexion in your feet. So I would go into, say, a plie where you just do a very simple bend of the knees, and my ankles would pinch all those tendons in there. So it would be absolutely excruciating for me to just bend my legs.
Were the teachers receptive to that?
Not really. I had a few teachers that were decently receptive, but it was an exception, not a rule. I went to a lot of chiropractors and a lot of physical therapists, but not a lot of doctors. Mostly people that the ballet companies and academies could hire to come in-house, because I also didn't have insurance. I didn't have out-of-state insurance.
Oh.
So any injury has to come out of pocket for any treatment, which really sucked when I fractured my first metatarsal and had to be put in a boot with crutches. Because even with insurance in state, it wouldn't have covered that regardless. It just didn't cover that sort of care. So it all just came out of pocket from my parents.
That is America moment.
Yeah, that's not even unique to ballet. That's just the American healthcare system being dog shit because private insurance companies profit off of death. Anyways, we also got pressured a lot when injured to just push through it, which is how I developed an extremely unhealthy attitude towards taking it slow and self-care. And this is something I still try and break myself to this day. And it's a remnant of my time in ballet where if I'm sick, if I'm injured, whatever, if I am physically capable of pushing through whatever suffering I am enduring, I will. If I have enough willpower to just say, fuck it, I will.
It's like a less human understanding of your own pain. It's just, if I can survive this, I will go through it.
Correct.
Wow.
And I still kind of have that attitude to this day. And it's part of the reason I can't call out of work. I have panic attacks if I'm sick and need to call out of work because I would go to my teachers and say, hey, I can barely walk right now. Can I have the day off of class? And they would say to me, well, you walked up here just fine to tell me. And I'm like, guess I'll just tough it out then. And they look down upon you if you were like, no, I actually need to take this time. The passive aggressiveness just goes through the roof simply because you're taking time for yourself, because there's this attitude that anytime you aren't dancing when you could be is time lost. It's time wasted. And instead of laying in bed and healing, you should at the very least be in the dance studio, sitting on the floor, taking notes.
Any system that asks you to change your prime directive from joy and the love of yourself and others, like your whole life, that's not a system that you should be putting yourself through.
But they take advantage of your passion, because ballet is an art form, and the system takes advantage of passionate individuals with a talent and drive to do this. And it takes advantage of their willingness to do anything for the art form that they love. and will squeeze every last drop out of you. There's a reason why it's a career that doesn't last very long.
I was wondering, yeah, like that was literally just going to be my next question is like, what's the usual age where people can no longer dance in ballet? Is it ageist? Like, are you expected to?
It's not ageist, your
Be
body
young?
just falls apart. People who are still professional ballet dancers in their 40s are extremely highly respected because it
So it's normal. It's
just doesn't
accepted
happen.
that it ruins your body.
Yeah, no, it's just a fact. It is very common for us to we were just talking about it, like, yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to walk after I'm 35.
Wow.
There's an average joke.
That is the kind of mindset I've heard from people with chronic substance abuse disorders. I'm probably not going to make it past 40 and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is not an indicator of a person who is being given the support that they need to have a mindset that will keep them happy.
The oldest ballet dancer who was still doing it professionally that I've ever met in person was 45 at the time, and he retired that year.
Wow.
That's like kind of ancient in the ballet world. Most people retire in their 30s. Also, to add insult to industry, it doesn't pay well at all. A good salary for a professional ballet dancer is $40,000 a year.
Oh, so you're not retiring at 45, you're just tagging out and doing something else.
No, you go get a different job or you become a teacher. This is not something you do for the money. This is not something you do because it's going to make you a living. It's something you do because you want to pour every ounce of your mind, body, and soul into an art form. And unfortunately, the entire structure of the industry takes advantage of that.
Do you see the potential for structural reform of the ballet industry? Like, are there more inclusive spaces that are aware of?
The contemporary ballet world gives me hope. There's a few different aspects to the ballet industry. There is the classical ballet, which is what I am most intimately familiar with. There is the contemporary ballet world, and there's the modern dance, modern ballet world. Modern dance and modern ballet has its own problems and its own idiosyncrasies that lead to a lot of toxic behaviors, and it's just a very weird, artsy, elitist sort of atmosphere. But contemporary ballet is a space built by people who didn't feel they fully fit into the professional ballet classical framework and start these small companies and try and do things right. I have a lot of respect for these people because it's the only environment I've ever seen that is healthy and takes the health and well-being of its dancers to heart. Now, this isn't a universal thing. It is simply far more common than in the classical ballet world. That sort of environment is almost unheard of in the classical ballet world, as far as I'm concerned. From everything I ever heard, it just is a universal, kind of all this way if you're involved in that space. But the contemporary ballet world has a lot more good eggs. They give me hope.
If the consistent factor is I couldn't handle it in the big league shitty, everyone has this specific framework place, then maybe reformation is something to be expected, and I'm really glad that they have that in that space.
Yeah, the contemporary ballet world is a really beautiful space. It has its flaws. I mean, there's companies that have extremely high turnover rates because contemporary ballet also attempts to push the boundaries of what one can do with dance. The company Momix is a contemporary modern performing arts company that does a lot of touring, and most of their performances are incredibly prop based and surrealist. So I'm talking about, I got to see in person a dress rehearsal, and one of the pieces was, it was 4 people on stage with like 5-foot tall mirrors, and they held the mirrors at an angle so that it reflected their legs. So all you see on stage is the legs and the reflection of their legs for like the whole piece.
Oh.
It's crazy cool shit. But unfortunately, a lot of that kind of dance is really hard on your body. So companies that do that really avant-garde shit usually have really high turnover rates because you can only really do it for so long. As far as reform goes, the contemporary ballet world gives me hope that it can happen, but so much of these people are set in their own ways, and the largest companies are the largest problems. New York City Ballet is infamous for a culture of abuse and exploitation, and specifically, trigger warning, sexual abuse. There was a very famous story of a dancer who was assaulted by multiple male members of the company, and this was at New York City Ballet. She reported it, she was fired, then sued, and I think she won? I hope she won. I don't remember the specific outcome of that case, but yeah, they will do everything to cover it up. And New York City Ballet is one of the largest ballet companies in the world. It's bad.
Is there anyone who was in it as long as you were that doesn't know this shit?
No, No. You are exposed to it whether you like it or not if you're in it for this long. You either deal with it firsthand or you hear with it from others. Usually you deal with it at least at some level firsthand. I actually had it better than a lot of people. A lot of my peers had it a lot worse. The more talent you have, the harder they work you. I was a very slightly above average dancer. I was not a prodigy. I had a lot of promise to be a very good corps member. And corps meaning the corps de ballet, which is the largest body of a ballet company. To quickly break down the framework a ballet company operates on, you have usually, if there's an academy attached, you have your pre-professional division, which these people are paying to be here and are still technically in dance education, but are recognized to be at a similar level to the people directly above. Then you have the trainees or second company, depending on where you are. They usually serve the same purpose. And these are usually unpaid performers who come to rehearsals and perform on stage and are usually given some sort of stipend, but no form of hourly or salary-based pay. Then you have above that the corps de ballet, which is the first paid position, like truly paid position. And these are the people that make up the majority of the ballet, the people that you see standing on the side, acting, the people who have to sit in one position on stage for 30 minutes. And that's where most people end up. It's very hard to get out of the corps unless you are exceptionally talented. And then above that is soloist. So soloists usually are still doing corps roles, but occasionally get soloist roles and get to perform the standout pieces in a ballet, which are pas de deux, pas de trois, which mean dance for two, dance for three, which is usually a pas de deux is the female does a solo, the male does a solo, they do a coda together at the end, with sometimes a shorter coda at the beginning. And then above that, you have principal ballet dancers, who are the highest paid and the only ones really making a living off of this. Because soloists are usually still paid as corps members. You get more responsibility and no more pay. Now, principal ballet dancers, they actually kind of have it nice. They're prioritized. They are the highest value asset in the company.
They're the irreplaceables.
They are the irreplaceables. They are the people that can threaten to leave and go somewhere else to get what they want. I have a lot of respect for those people, but they're also all incredibly cutthroat and willing to do anything to get to where they are. And I can't hold that against them because it's kind of what you just have to do. That is the structure of your typical ballet company. Some don't operate like that and don't have a structured format. I know a lot of places are drifting away from that style because it is extremely archaic. Once again, this was created during the Renaissance in France. So these practices are all pretty outdated.
I'm gonna be honest, when I hear Renaissance era European country culture plus bad body image standards and rigid gender roles with an archaic corporate structure, I can't think of a good ending to the sentence.
Because there isn't one. Because, yeah, you're right. This doesn't go well. Unless you become an irreplaceable, then you kind of just have it cushy. And if you're at that level, you are on a fast track to becoming a teacher or an instructor or director or some member of faculty or wherever you are while you have that position.
And you're probably mentally primed to be part of the problem.
Yep, they won't let you up that high unless you agree with them. I'll put it that way. So, the entire system is built to exploit people. Yippee! We're not even in my last year yet. I still have a whole other year of this to go through. So let's get through that. My last year I spent in Tennessee, and during this time I started working at Starbucks. I worked 20 hours a week at Starbucks, and I was dancing 40 hours a week, sometimes 60, especially during performance season.
So you're 17, 18 this year?
This was 1920.
Okay, so this is towards the end.
Yeah, this is towards the end. This was the year I truly burned out. This was the year I was like, if I don't do something else, I'm not making it out of this alive. If I don't quit, there's not a happy ending. And that was the realization I came to that caused me to quit. I realized my mental state is declining. I'm not improving at a rate I'm happy with. If this continues, I'm not making it out of this. and I'm glad I quit. But working a second job, essentially, working two jobs, working a full-time job and a part-time job, ostensibly, while being in this culture is torture. I would go to work at 7 a.m. Sometimes I'd get up early and, hang out at work for an hour or so before I started my shift. Work usually a 7 to 12 shift. Peak at Starbucks. It's the busiest hours. And this was a high volume store, so it was always busy. And then I would come home for an hour, maybe eat something, maybe not. And then I would go into class at usually 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I would be there between 8 and 10 o'clock at night. Then I would come home and I would usually stay up late and deprive myself of sleep for any semblance of free time that I could scrape together. Because me as a person, personally, and this was another thing I realized, I can't do ballet because it demands 110% of your life. It wants to be everything. It wants to be all of the media you consume. It wants to be everything you think about. It wants you to build your entire life around it. And I can't do that. Too ADHD, have too many interests, just wasn't going to happen. So I was usually getting about 4 hours of sleep every night. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less.
Oh my god.
But it was during this time I discovered online communities and I started playing Destiny 2, funnily enough. Don't play Destiny 2. But I got involved in this really wonderful community, and with the support of them and also buying my first VR headset this year, I started to be able to explore my own identity outside of being a male ballet dancer. And with a lot of support and help, I began talking to the teachers and saying, hey, I don't think I'm cut out for this. I don't know if I'm coming back next year. I think I might quit. And the worst part was that I had these people tell me, if you do one more year here, you're basically guaranteed a contract. To this day, I still don't know how much of that was them just trying to keep an asset. Because I talked to some of those students who had been there for a really long time, and they said, yeah, they say that to a lot of people who then don't get in the next year and only further damage themselves by trying. Ultimately, I made the decision. That's it. I quit. And I moved back to my hometown. I drove across the country, packed up my whole life, packed up my cat who I had gotten while I was living out there, little Truffle. I often credit that cat saved my life because I went through some pretty dark episodes during this time, and having that little creature who will look you in the eyes, and they don't can understand any of this. All they know is that they rely on you. And I would see that and I would go, well, I can't make any stupid decisions. You're gonna miss me too much. And it was with my cat and the support of my girlfriend at the time was that I kept it together long enough to get to the end of the year, and I broke down to my family and I said, I can't do it anymore. I know you guys have put literally tens of thousands of dollars into this for me because it was what I said I wanted to do, and you, even when things were tough, scraped together the money for me to be able to do this. I had to overcome that guilt and that feeling like I owed it to them to just say, if I keep doing this, I don't see much of a future for me. And thankfully, my parents were receptive. They were like, well, we'd rather have you around, so let's get you home. And I mean, obviously, I'll answer any questions, but I mean, that is the broad, overarching story. There's a ton of smaller stories in there. Like I said, this is 16 years of history, and it'd be impossible for me to cover every little bit in any time frame that is reasonable.
With everything you've been through, how do you see the medium, the art itself? Because there's no way to separate it, but as best you can.
The medium of dance is one that I hold extremely close to my heart. It is an ultimate form of self-expression through abstract movements of one's own self. It's beautiful in a way that very few things are, and I miss it. I miss it a lot. Sorry.
You're doing great.
I have nothing but love for the art form and nothing but malice for the industry that took a thing I loved and was so passionate about and used it to tear me apart and used it to tear so many others apart. And I want to emphasize, I had it easy. Some of the shit that those girls went through was borderline cartoon villain level cruel. I've seen stories of I knew a girl who was taking enough Benadryl to send you into a delirium state regularly just to escape what she was being put through. And if you know anything about deliriums or what it is like to take Benadryl at that level, not pleasant. extremely psychologically dangerous. They are guaranteed nightmare trips. There's a reason why people joke about, I took 20 Benadryl and saw the Hat Man. The industry is so flawed. It is nothing but flaws, but the art itself is beautiful. And it's part of why I want to engage in dancing in VRChat. And it's something I am interested in getting more involved in because I do still have so much love and passion for this, but I haven't felt comfortable in any space doing it since. I even got asked by someone started a company in my hometown and they reached out to me personally. It was like, hey, we'd be really grateful if you would come back, essentially come out of retirement to dance for us. And I told them there's not a chance because I'd just be walking straight back into the same industry that I walked out of.
Well, if you want a place to do a thing different, you can't really get rid of the transness here.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of great spaces for me to be able to explore it here. I'm just busy and haven't had the time. Oh, I didn't even get into the whole me being extremely neurodivergent and over medicated for this entire period of my life.
I was gonna ask about that because you told me about getting what you described as cooked by your medical provider, but that's probably a whole different journey, like intertwined, but
Yes, very, very intertwined, but its own independent thing. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was, I think, 10, 11, and my family really did a really good job of helping me manage it through balanced diet, nutrition, coping mechanisms, seeking professional help with therapy to find coping skills and things that made it easier. But I was still a preteen, so 2 years later, they put me on methylphenidate, which, if I remember correctly, is the generic form of Ritalin, and started at, same dose everyone starts at, the bottom dose. And over the years, my dose just kept getting raised. They tried to
Yeah.
put me on a non-stimulant for a little while, and it just didn't work. Basically did nothing for me, so we went back to the stimulant. And they just kept upping my dose until by the end of it, I was on 72 milligrams of methylphenidate, extended release, every day.
isn't that like 3 times average?
Yeah, it's the highest federally prescribable dose.
Oh my god. I could imagine that exacerbated not eating too, potentially.
Yeah, well, it kills your appetite. I usually tell people, like, I permanently had my brain chemistry altered by taking that much for that long. It was so bad that I was an apathetic zombie half the time. And the other half of the time, I was an absolutely emotional mess because I wasn't on the medication. And I cold turkeyed off of that shit.
Ooh,
Oh, let's go. Okay, damn.
Don't do that, by the way.
Yeah.
we ball in the worst way possible.
I literally was like, I'm gonna lose it if I keep taking this medication. I told my girlfriend at the time, the other day I felt a switch flip in my head, and my entire internal monologue became different overnight. The fundamental way I thought changed. And it was very clearly because of the medication, because the change in my thought processes were very closely related to the mental effects of the medication I was taking. The symptoms were very similar to the effects of Ritalin. And it was also due to this medication that I believe, my theory is that I developed a depersonalization derealization disorder due to it, because the way I describe how I am these days is normally you're at the wheel of the vehicle, right? You turn the wheel left, you go left. You are in control. Now, for me, pretty much at all times, I'm not actually at the wheel. I'm in the back seat. I tell the person at the wheel, hey, turn left. And they do exactly what I say every time. Every
It's
single
not you
time,
driving the
they do
car.
exactly what I say, but it's not me driving the car.
I completely
Jesus.
relate with that when I depersonalize or derealize. It's like, okay, I guess I'm just in the fucking backseat now, and I just kind of have to
Now,
wait.
imagine that being how you live 24/7.
Oh yeah, I could imagine.
That's my
Yeah,
life right
that's
now.
Do you get that thing where when you're in a vehicle driving, you will become dissociated in a way that it feels like the whole world is moving instead of you? Have you
Yes,
got that before?
all the time.
Okay, because I've experienced that once in my entire life, and it was fucking terrifying. And I was like, if this is what dissociation, if this is what that experience is, I want to do everything I can to help me and everyone else never have to experience it again.
So the first time I entered the state that I am actually currently occupying, unfortunately, this is how I am right now. The first time it happened was post. Me and my girlfriend had just had, and I snapped into this dissociated state, and I just started freaking out, genuinely having an absolute meltdown because I was like, holy shit, I'm not in control. This isn't me. Why do I not feel like I'm in the driver's seat right now? And I was freaking out. She helped me through it really well, as best she could. This was years ago.
Did this develop? This wasn't something that you had dealt with?
This developed while I was in dance.
I
It
see.
started my first year in Denver, so like second year as a pre-professional is when it really started developing, and it's only worsened as time has gone on to the point where now it's just kind of constant. It used to be like something would happen and I would fully dissociate, and now I'm just completely derealized pretty much all the time. Moms have been helping though.
If you have any advice for people who are either in ballet or thinking of getting into it, whether it be get the fuck out or otherwise.
Yeah, get the fuck out. If you are in any way thinking of pursuing ballet as a profession, understand that what you are going to go through will likely be just as bad or worse than what I have gone through. You will be put in traumatizing situations. You will not be taken care of by these people no matter what they tell you. If as long as you know that, do with that information as you will, but these people value you for what you are capable of and not for who you are.
Don't be an asset.
Don't be an asset. Don't be an asset to anyone. This goes beyond the ballet world. I could stand on a soapbox about that all day, but put yourself first. And if you feel you are in a situation where you are being taken advantage of, seek a trusted friend, adult, depending on your age. Seek someone you know you can trust and seek help getting out of that situation, regardless of the situation, regardless of it's ballet or an abusive relationship or anything. All of these situations have a common thread, and the way out is always with support from others. I wouldn't have made it out if it wasn't for the people who I had around me who told me, yes, it's okay. It's okay to get out of this. It's okay to leave, because the sunk cost fallacy is a very real thing, and it still fucks with me. It still wreaks havoc in my head to this day of, man, I let so many years go to waste. I let so many people down, so many people who were believing in me, who said, you can do this, but I'm here because of it.
I'm so glad you are.
Me too.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested.